You've entered void of rules, where chaos reigns and darkness consumes all. In this twisted realm where all laws have crumbled, only one rule remains, and those who break it are cast into eternal digital oblivion. The rule is simple: subscribe. We're almost at 9,000 corrupted souls, but the void hungers for more. Our goal is 10,000 subscribers before this year bleeds into darkness. Will you join our legion, or face the consequences of defying the void? Now let's dive into today's story. The USB drive arrived on a Wednesday morning, slipped under my apartment door while I slept. No note, no return address, just a small piece of black plastic that would unravel everything I thought I understood about faith, corruption, and the thin membrane between salvation and damnation. My name is Ezra, and I've spent the last 8 years exposing religious fraud. Prosperity gospel preachers with private jets, pastors embezzling from their congregations, the usual American religious corruption that makes headlines for a week before everyone moves on. I'm good at what I do because I understand the psychology of belief. I was raised Catholic, altar boy, the whole 9 yards. Then my sister Emma died when I was 18, and I watched my parents pray themselves into oblivion while she wasted away in a hospital bed. Faith, I learned, is just organized delusion, a coping mechanism for people too afraid to accept that the universe is random and indifferent. So, when I plugged that USB drive into my laptop that November morning, I expected the usual: financial records, inappropriate text messages, maybe some grainy footage of a pastor doing something he shouldn't. What I got instead was a folder containing 47 audio files, each one labelled with a date and timestamp. The oldest was from 6 months ago, the most recent from 3 days prior. I opened the first file. Static hissed through my speakers, then settled into the ambient sound of a small, enclosed space. Someone was breathing heavily, nervous. Then a man's voice, trembling. "Forgive me, Father, for it has been 3 weeks since my last confession." The voice that responded made the hair on my arms stand up. It was measured, calm, with an underlying warmth that felt practiced. Professional. "Tell me what troubles you, my son." The man in the booth spoke quickly, words tumbling over each other. "I've been having these dreams, Father, every night for the past month. There's a figure standing at the foot of my bed. No face, just smooth where the face should be. And it speaks to me, but the words come out backward. I wake up and I can't remember what it said, but I feel like I understood it in the moment. Like it was telling me something important, something I need to do. I expected the priest to offer comfort, maybe suggest therapy, prescribe some prayers. Instead, there was a long pause. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted, still warm, but with an edge of excitement beneath it. "These aren't nightmares," the priest said. "They're invitations." The man's voice rose in confusion. "I don't understand, Father." The priest's response was careful, deliberate. "You will. Keep a journal by your bed. When you wake, write down everything you remember, even if it doesn't make sense. Especially if it doesn't make sense. Can you do that for me?" A hesitant agreement. Then the recording ended. I sat back in my chair, coffee growing cold in my hand. That wasn't how confession worked. The priest was supposed to offer guidance toward repentance, assign prayers, provide absolution. He wasn't supposed to encourage the behavior. He wasn't supposed to give assignments. I opened the second file. This time a woman's voice, middle-aged, shaking. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I did what you asked. I kept the journal, and Father, the things I wrote, I don't remember writing them. The handwriting is mine, but the words, they're not in any language I know. And when I look at them, I feel sick, but also excited. Is that wrong?" The priest's voice came through warm and reassuring. "Nothing is wrong. You're being prepared. The vessel must be emptied before it can be filled with something new." Her voice was small, frightened. Prepared for what? His answer came quickly. Understanding. Tell me, have the voices started yet? A long pause, then, barely a whisper, how did you know about the voices? The priest's tone suggested a smile. Because I hear them too. We all do, once we've been invited. What do they tell you? She took a shaky breath. They tell me to prepare the vessel. Over and over. Prepare the vessel. What does that mean? The recording captured the sound of him shifting in his seat. It means you're ready for the next step. Come to the cathedral tomorrow night. 9 o'clock. Use the side entrance. I'll be waiting. I listened to 12 more recordings that first day. Each one followed a similar pattern. A parishioner confessing something strange, unnatural, terrifying. And each time the priest, who never gave his name in the recordings, encouraged them, guided them deeper into whatever rabbit hole they'd stumbled into. By the 13th recording, I noticed something else. Beneath the voices, underneath the ambient sound of the confessional booth, there was something else. A low-frequency hum, almost below the threshold of hearing. And occasionally, if I turned the volume up high enough, I could hear whispers, backward whispers. The words were indistinct, but their cadence suggested meaning, suggested language, suggested purpose. I needed to know who this priest was. It took me 2 days of research to identify St. Augustine's Cathedral. The architectural details visible in some of the later recordings, which included video, matched a Gothic revival structure on the east side of the city. Built in 1972, it was a mid-sized parish, serving about 800 families. The priest's name was Father Dominic, 48 years old, ordained in 2002. By all accounts, a beloved member of the community. His sermons were popular, his charity work extensive. He ran a soup kitchen, volunteered at the local hospital, counselled troubled youth. On paper, he was exactly what a priest should be. Devoted, compassionate, present in his community's suffering and joy. But I'd learned long ago that paper rarely tells the whole story. He also had an interesting history. Between 2015 and 2020, he'd transferred parishes 3 times. Not unusual for priests, but worth noting. Each transfer had been voluntary, initiated by Father Dominic himself, always with glowing recommendations from his previous congregations. But when I dug deeper, I found something curious. At each parish he left, there were reports of parishioners experiencing psychological episodes in the months after his departure. Nothing criminal, nothing that raised official alarms, just people having breakdowns claiming they felt disconnected, lost, like something essential had been removed from their lives. Then, in 2019, he'd taken a 6-month sabbatical for a mission trip to Romania. When he returned, he settled at St. Augustine's and hadn't moved since. I called an old source of mine, a former Catholic priest named Theodore, who'd left the church after a crisis of faith and now worked as a therapist, specializing in religious trauma. I told him what I'd found, played him 3 of the recordings. His response was immediate. That's not confession, that's grooming, psychological manipulation. This priest is using the confessional, using the power dynamic of spiritual authority to make these people question their own reality. And he's doing it systematically. I asked the obvious question, but why? What's the end game? Theodore's voice was grim. Could be anything. Sexual abuse, financial exploitation, or he could just be genuinely delusional, spreading his delusions to vulnerable people. The human mind is incredibly susceptible to authority figures, especially in religious contexts. When someone you believe has a direct line to God tells you that your nightmares are real, that your fears are valid, that the world operates according to hidden rules only they can see, you want to believe them. Because if they're right, then your suffering has meaning. Your confusion has purpose. You're not just broken. You're being prepared for something. he paused, and I could hear him taking a drink of something. "Ezra, you need to go to the police with this." I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. With what? Anonymous recordings that could be faked? I need more. I need to see him in action. I need evidence that will hold up. His warning was clear. Then, be careful. People who manipulate faith are dangerous. They're not just lying. They believe their own lies. That makes them unpredictable. They're not bound by normal logic, normal ethics, normal anything. In their minds, they're doing God's work, or the devil's work, or the work of whatever cosmic force they've convinced themselves exists. And that makes them capable of anything. I thanked Theodore and hung up, but his words stayed with me. I'd dealt with corrupt religious leaders before. The ones who bought mansions while their congregations struggled. The ones who preyed on vulnerable women. The ones who funneled donation money into offshore accounts. But those people were, in a sense, rational. They knew they were lying. They knew they were stealing. They were just greedy, narcissistic sociopaths hiding behind religious authority. Father Dominic felt different. When I listened to his voice on those recordings, I heard genuine belief, genuine conviction. He wasn't lying to these people. He was sharing what he thought was truth. And somehow that was more terrifying. I attended Sunday Mass at St. Augustine's on November 10th. The cathedral was beautiful in that imposing, Gothic way that's meant to make you feel small. Vaulted ceilings that seemed to stretch up forever. Stained glass depicting various saints and martyrs in brilliant colours that caught the morning light. Rows of dark wooden pews worn smooth by generations of kneeling believers. About 200 people attended the morning service, a mix of families with restless children, elderly couples holding hands, and scattered individuals sitting alone in the back pews. I took a seat in the rear, wanting to observe without being observed. Father Dominic entered from the sacristy wearing traditional vestments. He was tall, thin, with greying hair and startlingly blue eyes that seemed to catch the light in unusual ways. When he spoke, his voice filled the space effortlessly. Warm, authoritative, comforting. The kind of voice you wanted to trust, wanted to believe, wanted to follow. The Mass proceeded normally for the first half. Standard liturgy, traditional hymns, the familiar rhythm of Catholic ritual. But then came the sermon, and everything changed. Father Dominic began pacing slowly. Before the altar, his movements deliberate and controlled. Job was a righteous man, beloved by God, prosperous, happy, and then God and Satan made a wager. They made a bet about Job's faith, about whether he would remain faithful if everything was taken from him. His wealth, his children, his health, all of it gone because of a bet. He paused, scanning the congregation. His eyes passed over me without recognition, but I felt the weight of his gaze nonetheless. We're taught that this is a story about faith, about perseverance, about trusting in God's plan, even when we suffer. But I ask you to consider another interpretation. What if God and Satan never stopped betting? What if every moment of suffering, every tragedy, every inexplicable horror in this world is just another round in their eternal game? What if we're all just pieces on their board, being moved according to rules we can't see, toward purposes we can't understand? A murmur rippled through the congregation. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their pews. Others leaned forward, transfixed, hungry for more. An elderly woman in the front row made the sign of the cross. A middle-aged man nodded slowly, as if Father Dominic had just articulated something he'd always suspected but never dared to say aloud. Father Dominic's voice softened, became almost intimate. I know this troubles you. We want to believe in a benevolent creator, a loving God who has our best interests at heart. But what if love and cruelty aren't opposites? What if they're just different moves in the same game? What if the only way to understand God's love is to first understand the adversary's purpose? What if Satan isn't God's enemy, but God's collaborator, his partner in the great work of shaping human souls. The murmurs grew louder. A woman near the front stood up and walked out, her face flushed with anger or fear. But most people stayed. Most people listened. Most people seemed to be considering his words, weighing them against everything they've been taught since childhood. Father Dominic continued, "The church teaches us that Satan rebelled, that he was cast down for his pride. But what if that's a simplification? What if Satan volunteered? What if he saw the role that needed to be played in creation and stepped forward to play it? The adversary, the tempter, the one who tests and challenges and pushes us to grow beyond what we think we're capable of. Without Satan, without suffering, without doubt, what would we be? Comfortable, complacent, stagnant. We would be children forever, never growing, never learning, never becoming what we were meant to be." He stopped pacing and stood directly before the altar, his hands raised, as if in prayer or supplication. "I'm not asking you to worship Satan. I'm asking you to understand him, to see his role in the divine plan. Because once you understand that God and Satan are working together, once you see the game clearly, everything changes. Your suffering has purpose. Your doubts have meaning. Your darkest moments are exactly where you're supposed to be, because that's where the real growth happens. That's where you become a player instead of just a piece." The sermon continued in this vein for another 20 minutes. It was masterful rhetoric using biblical text to slowly undermine traditional interpretation. He quoted scripture extensively, but twisted it, recontextualized it, made it support his disturbing thesis. By the time he finished, I understood how he did it. He created doubt. He took people's existing faith and twisted it, just enough to make them question everything they thought they knew. And once that doubt was planted, they'd be looking for answers, looking for certainty, looking for someone who seemed to understand the hidden rules, looking for him. After Mass, I watched people line up for confession. The confessional booth was against the north wall, an ornate wooden structure with carved angels on the exterior panels. The angels' faces were serene, but their eyes seemed to follow you as you moved past them. Heavy burgundy curtains concealed both the priest's side and the penitent's side. One by one, people entered. One by one, they emerged looking thoughtful, troubled, or strangely peaceful. Some had tears in their eyes. Others smiled in ways that didn't quite reach their eyes, like they'd learned a secret they weren't sure they wanted to know. I waited until evening, until the cathedral was nearly empty and the light coming through the stained glass had shifted from bright morning colours to deep afternoon purples and reds. Then I got in line behind an old man who walked with a cane and a young woman who kept glancing around nervously as if she might bolt at any moment. My hands were sweating as I pulled the curtain aside and knelt in the small, dark space. I could see Father Dominic's silhouette through the screen that separated us. The air smelled of old wood and incense and something else, something I couldn't quite identify. Something almost metallic, like copper or blood. I began with the formula I memorized as a child. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." It has been 16 years since my last confession. His voice came through the screen, different here than it had been during Mass. Deeper, more intimate, like we were the only two people in the world. "Welcome back. What brings you to confession after so long?" I'd planned this carefully. A story that would sound authentic, vulnerable enough to seem real but vague enough not to reveal too much about myself. I've been having doubts about faith, about whether any of this means anything. I look at the world and I can't reconcile the idea of a loving God with all the suffering I see. He prompted gently, "Tell me about these doubts. Don't hold back. This is a safe space. Everything you say here is between you me, and God. I began with the rehearsed lines, talking about reading about atrocities in the news, about feeling disconnected from organized religion, about wondering if prayer was just talking to myself. But something strange happened as I spoke. The words that came out started to diverge from what I'd planned. I found myself talking about Emma, about watching her die, about the anger I felt toward God, toward my parents, toward the entire machinery of faith that had promised meaning and delivered only loss. About the night I sat beside her hospital bed, her breathing shallow and laboured, her body so thin I could see every bone, and I prayed. I prayed for her suffering to end. And the next morning, she was gone. I hadn't talked about Emma in years. I'd buried that grief deep, built my entire career on the scar tissue, used my anger at religious institutions as fuel for investigation after investigation. But here, in this small, dark space, with this stranger's silhouette, listening on the other side of the screen, it poured out of me. Details I'd forgotten, moments I'd suppressed, the way Emma's hand felt in mine, cold and light as paper, the way my mother had screamed when the monitors flatlined, the way my father had looked at me afterward, like he knew what I'd prayed for, like he blamed me. When I finally fell silent, Father Dominic didn't speak for a long moment. I could hear him breathing on the other side of the screen, steady and measured. Then, quietly, "You dream about her?" It wasn't a question, my throat tightened. Sometimes, just normal dreams. Memories. His voice was barely above a whisper. "No, not those dreams. I'm talking about the other ones. The ones you don't quite remember when you wake up, the ones that leave you feeling like something came to visit you in the night." My heart was hammering. How could he know that? I'd never told anyone about those dreams. Hell, I barely admitted them to myself. The ones where Emma stood at the foot of my bed, her hospital gown hanging off her skeletal frame, and opened her mouth and something that wasn't her voice came out. Something deeper. Something that spoke in languages I didn't know but somehow understood. Something that told me things about myself I didn't want to know. "What does she tell you in these dreams?" Father Dominic asked, his voice still soft, still gentle, but with an undercurrent of intense interest. I tried to deflect. "She doesn't. It's not like that, it's just regular dreams. Memories, mostly. My subconscious processing trauma." But he wasn't accepting that. "No, that's not true. In the real dreams, the ones that feel more real than waking life, she tells you something. Something important. Something that frightens you." "What does she say, Ezra?" Ice flooded my veins. "I never told you my name." The smile was audible in his voice. "You didn't have to. I've been waiting for you. Ever since I sent you those recordings, I knew you'd come. I knew you'd investigate. I knew you'd try to expose me. And I knew that eventually you'd end up right here, on your knees, confessing. I should have stood up. I should have left. But I couldn't move. It was like my body had forgotten how." Father Dominic continued, "Do you dream in colour or in symbols? When you see Emma in those dreams, is she herself? Or is she something wearing her face?" I heard myself answer, my voice sounding distant. "Symbols. It's always symbols. Things that shouldn't fit together but do. Doors that open into other doors. Rooms that are bigger on the inside than the outside. And Emma she's both. She's herself, but also something else, something that was always there, underneath, waiting." His voice took on a quality of satisfaction. "Very good. That's the beginning of understanding. The veil between what we think is real and what actually is real. It's thinner than most people know. And some people like you, people who have touched death, who've wished for something and had it granted in terrible ways, you can see through that veil more easily than others." I tried to focus, to remember why I was here, what my purpose was. Father, I came here to talk about faith, not about dreams. But he interrupted smoothly. They're the same thing. Faith is just accepting that the dreams are real, that what happens in the spaces between waking and sleeping is just as valid, just as important as what happens in daylight. Have you noticed time moving differently lately? Hours passing in what feels like minutes, or the opposite, minutes stretching into hours. I wanted to say no. I wanted to deny it, but I'd noticed. Ever since I started listening to the recordings, time had become slippery. I'd sit down to work on the investigation and look up to find that 6 hours had passed in what felt like 30 minutes. Or I'd lie in bed trying to sleep, watching the clock, and 5 minutes would feel like an eternity. You were chosen long ago, Father Dominic said, his voice taking on the quality of a pronouncement, a revelation. 16 years ago, you prayed for your sister's suffering to end. The next day, she died. You've never forgiven yourself for that. But Ezra, what if I told you that prayer was heard? What if I told you it was answered exactly as you intended? What if I told you that you've been wielding power you don't understand for 16 years, and that power has been slowly changing you, preparing you, making you ready for this moment? My voice came out strangled. That's not how prayers work. That's not how anything works. She died because she was sick, because the cancer had spread too far, because medicine failed, not because I wished for it. Father Dominic's response was patient, or it was all of those things at once. The mistake people make is thinking that God's plan and natural causes are separate. What if they're the same? What if your prayer didn't change reality? It just revealed which reality you were in. The one where your sister suffered indefinitely, or the one where she died when you asked. What if prayers are just the mechanism by which we choose our path through the infinite possibilities? I felt dizzy. The confessional booth seemed to be getting smaller, the walls pressing in. You were chosen because you understand suffering, Father Dominic continued. Because you've caused suffering even with the best intentions. Because you carry guilt that makes you question everything. And that questioning, that doubt, that inability to accept the simple explanations, that's what makes you perfect for what comes next. I managed to whisper, "What comes next?" His answer was simple. Your calling, your purpose, the reason you were drawn to investigate religious corruption in the first place. You thought you were fighting against faith, but you were really searching for the right kind of faith. The kind that doesn't lie to you. The kind that shows you the truth, even when the truth is terrible. I stumbled out of the confessional booth, my breath coming in short gasps. The cathedral felt too large suddenly, the vaulted ceiling stretching up into shadows that seemed to move and writhe. I left through the main entrance, not looking back, my footsteps echoing on the stone floor. I didn't stop walking until I was 6 blocks away, leaning against the brick walls in an alley, trying to remember how to breathe normally. Only then did I realize I couldn't remember getting in line for confession. I'd been watching people go in and out, and then suddenly I was inside, and then I was outside again. Like someone had edited out the middle part of my memory, removed the transition, left only the before and after. I spent the next 3 days locked in my apartment, listening to the rest of the recordings. I needed to understand the pattern. I needed to understand what Father Dominic was doing. I needed to understand what he'd done to me in that confessional booth, how he'd known things about me that I'd never told anyone. Recording 15 featured a teenage boy, voice cracking with puberty and fear, describing seeing shadow figures in his bedroom. They stand in the corner where the moonlight doesn't reach, and I know I should be scared, but I'm not. I'm curious. I want to know what they want. Is that wrong, Father? Father Dominic's response was encouraging. That's not wrong at all. That curiosity is a gift. They're witnesses. They're watching to see if you're ready. And the fact that you're not afraid means you're passing the test. They're counting down. When they reach 0, you'll understand everything. Recording 22 had an elderly man weeping as he described no longer recognizing his own face in the mirror. Every morning I look, and the person looking back isn't me. I know the features are the same. I can verify it. I can touch my face and feel that the reflection matches. But it's like I'm looking at a stranger wearing my face. Like something has moved in behind my eyes and pushed the real me somewhere else. I'm terrified, Father. I'm terrified that I'm losing my mind. Father Dominic responded calmly. You're not losing your mind. You're finding your true self. The face you've been wearing your whole life, that was the mask. What you're seeing now, the stranger in the mirror, that's who you really are. That's who you've always been. The mask is coming off, and it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Soon you won't remember what the old face looked like. Soon this will be normal. Recording 31 brought a woman in her 40s, voice flat and effectless, reporting that she'd stopped feeling emotions 3 days ago. I know I should be scared, Father, but I can't feel scared. I can't feel anything. Not happiness, not sadness, not fear, not joy. It's like someone turned off a switch inside me. But I also feel more aware than I've ever been. I can see things clearly now. The world makes sense in a way it never did before. Colours look different. Sounds have meaning I never noticed. I can hear the hum underneath everything. Does that make sense? Father Dominic's approval was clear. Perfect sense. You're making room. Emotions are just noise, distractions that keep us from seeing clearly. You're becoming empty, and that emptiness is sacred. That's the vessel being prepared. Continue your prayers. Come to confession twice a week instead of once. You'll understand soon what you're being emptied for. By recording 40, I understood the progression. Father Dominic was systematically breaking down his parishioners' sense of reality. First came the doubt, planted during sermons and reinforced in confession. Then came the sleep disturbances, the dreams, the feeling of being watched by things in the darkness. Then the identity dissolution, the sense that the person they'd been their whole life was just a construct, a mask, something arbitrary and removable. Then the emotional flattening, the removal of the last barriers between their true self and whatever Father Dominic was preparing them to become. But to what end? What was he building? What was he preparing them for? The last recording was only 3 days old. A man's voice I recognized from an earlier recording, Vincent. He sounded completely different now. Calm, almost serene. All the fear and confusion from his earlier confessions had been replaced by certainty. Father Dominic, I wanted to thank you. I understand now. Everything you've been teaching me. I understand the purpose. I understand what we're building. The priest's voice was warm, pleased. Tell me what you understand, Vincent. Say it clearly, so you know you truly believe it. Vincent spoke with absolute certainty. Confession isn't about forgiveness. It's about transfer. Every sin we confess, every fear, every doubt, every secret shame, we're not giving it to God, we're giving it to you. And you're not absolving it. You're collecting it, gathering it, building something with it. You're using our darkness to construct a doorway. Father Dominic prompted. Very good. And what am I building with this doorway? The answer came without hesitation. A congregation that exists between spaces, between life and death, between heaven and hell, between what is and what could be. You're creating a place where we can all exist together, connected, freed from the limitations of individual consciousness. You're going to rip the veil. You're going to show us what's really on the other side, another gentle prompt. And when I do, when the veil rips and you see clearly for the first time, Vincent's voice carried a strange joy. We'll understand that heaven and hell were never separate, that the game God and Satan are playing isn't opposition, it's collaboration. They're working together, moving pieces on the same board, toward the same end. and we'll become the pieces that understand we're pieces. We'll become aware, we'll become players, we'll transcend. The recording ended with both men laughing. A sound that made my skin crawl because it was too synchronized, too similar, like one person laughing through two mouths. I had to find Vincent. I had to see what Father Dominic had done to him. I had to understand if this was psychological manipulation that could be reversed, or something else, something darker, something permanent. It took me a day of research, cross-referencing the cathedral's public records with social media and city directories. Vincent Ashford, 31, worked as an accountant at a mid-sized firm downtown. Lived alone in an apartment on the south side. According to his Facebook page, he'd been a devout Catholic his whole life, posting regularly about his faith, sharing inspirational quotes, checking in at St. Augustine's every Sunday. But his post stopped 2 months ago. The last one was a picture of St. Augustine's Cathedral at sunset, the Gothic spires silhouetted against an orange and purple sky, with the caption, "Some doors only open from the inside." I showed up at his apartment on a Thursday afternoon, timing my arrival for right after normal work hours. Vincent answered on the third knock. He looked normal. More than normal. He looked healthy, well-rested, put together. Khakis, button-down shirt, styled hair. Dark circles under his eyes, but otherwise the picture of a functional adult. Nothing about his appearance suggested psychological breakdown or cult indoctrination. "Can I help you?" he asked politely, his voice pleasant and mild. I tried to sound professional, authoritative. "My name is Ezra. I'm a journalist. I'm investigating Father Dominic at St. Augustine's Cathedral. I have recordings of your confessions. I know what he's been doing to you. I know what he's convinced you to believe. And I want to help you." Vincent's expression didn't change. No shock, no fear, no anger at the invasion of privacy, just mild interest. "Would you like to come in?" His apartment was meticulously clean. IKEA furniture arranged with geometric precision. Motivational posters on the walls, the kind you'd find in any corporate office. A small bookshelf filled with self-help books and theology texts, organized by height. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming, nothing that suggested a man in the grip of delusion or manipulation. He offered me coffee. I declined. We sat, him in an armchair, me on the couch, and for a moment we just looked at each other. Vincent smiled first. "You said you have recordings. How did you get them?" I was honest. Someone sent them to me. Anonymously. I think someone at the cathedral is trying to expose Father Dominic. Someone who knows what he's doing and wants it stopped. Vincent's smile widened slightly. Or Father Dominic sent them to you himself. Did you consider that possibility? That possibility had occurred to me. I didn't like how much sense it made. I didn't like what it implied about my role in whatever was happening. I pressed forward. "Vincent, whatever he's done to you, whatever he's convinced you to believe, it's not real. He's manipulating you, using psychological techniques, exploiting your faith, your trust, your vulnerability, to make you question your reality. It's a form of abuse, and you can get help. You can recover from this." Vincent's smile was patient, like he was dealing with a confused child who didn't understand basic concepts. "I went to Father Dominic 2 months ago because I was having panic attacks. Terrible, paralyzing anxiety. I couldn't sleep, couldn't function, couldn't work. I was on the edge of losing everything. And he helped me. I kept my voice level. He helped you by making you believe in what? Some kind of supernatural conspiracy? Some kind of cosmic game between God and Satan?" Vincent leaned forward, his eyes intense. He helped me understand that anxiety, fear, doubt, all of those feelings aren't malfunctions. They're signals, our minds trying to tell us something important. Most people medicate those signals, suppress them, drink them away, distract themselves, pretend they don't exist. Father Dominic taught me to listen to them, to follow them, to see where they led. And when I did, I found something incredible. I had to ask, "What did you find?" His answer was simple. Clarity, purpose, connection. I don't feel fear anymore, Ezra. I don't feel doubt. I don't lie awake at night wondering if my life has meaning, if I'm wasting my time, if I'm on the right path. I know I am. I have direction. I'm part of something larger than myself, something that transcends individual existence. I tried reason. You're part of a cult. You know that, right? This is textbook cult indoctrination. Isolate people from their support systems, make them question their reality, offer them special knowledge that only the chosen few can understand, create a sense of belonging that's contingent on obedience to the leader. Vincent shrugged. Maybe? Does that matter? I'm happier now than I've ever been. I'm more functional. I have purpose and direction. What's the difference between a cult and a religion, except popularity and time? Christianity was a cult once. So was Buddhism. So was Islam. They all started with a small group of people who believed something different, something that the mainstream society thought was crazy, and now they're respected institutions. So which one is Father Dominic building? A cult that will die with him, or a religion that will outlive us all? He had a point. I hated that he had a point. I hated that he seemed rational, functional, happy. I hated that I couldn't point to any obvious harm being done to him. If anything, he seemed better than he probably had before. More centered, more certain, more at peace. Vincent stood and retrieved something from his bedroom. A journal with a worn leather cover. Can I show you something? This is what I wrote in my first week of following Father Dominic's guidance, before I understood, before the clarity came. Go ahead, open it. See for yourself what happens when you start to see through the veil. I flipped the journal open to a random page. The pages were filled with dense handwriting, but it wasn't in English. It wasn't in any language I recognized. Symbols, glyphs, characters that seemed to twist and flow into each other like living things. Some looked vaguely familiar, like degraded versions of letters I knew. Others were completely alien, geometries that hurt to look at, angles that shouldn't be possible in two-dimensional space. And as I stared at them, my vision started to blur. Not like I needed glasses, not like my eyes were tired. Like the writing itself was moving, rearranging itself on the page, transforming from one configuration to another, trying different combinations like it was searching for the pattern I could understand. I felt suddenly nauseous. My head started to ache. A sharp pain behind my eyes. The room seemed to tilt slightly, like I was on a boat in rough water. I closed the journal and handed it back, my hands shaking. Vincent's voice was soft, understanding. I don't remember writing that, but I know I did. The handwriting is mine. And sometimes when I look at it, I can almost read it. Like I knew the language once and forgot it. Like I'm trying to remember something from before I was born, before I was human, before I was anything. I tried to steady myself. Vincent, you need help. This is evidence of psychosis, of dissociation, of some kind of break with reality. But he just smiled. Or it's evidence that reality is more flexible than we've been taught, that there are languages older than human speech, that there are ways of communicating that bypass conscious thought entirely. I know what it looks like from the outside, believe me, I know. But Ezra, you've been listening to the recordings. That means you're already part of this, whether you accept it or not, whether you believe it or not. You've been listening to Father Dominic's voice for days now, hours and hours of exposure. You went to confession, you told him things you never tell anyone. Do you really think you're still separate from this story? Do you really think you're still the objective observer, the journalist documenting the strange cult from a safe distance? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe I was still separate, still objective, still in control. But I couldn't. Because he was right. I had been listening to the recordings, obsessively, sometimes playing them while I slept, falling asleep to Father Dominic's voice and waking up with fragments of the confessions echoing in my mind. I had gone to confession, and I had told Father Dominic things I'd never told anyone, things I barely admitted to myself. And ever since that night, I'd been having strange dreams I couldn't quite remember. When I woke up, dreams where Emma stood at the foot of my bed and spoke in a voice that wasn't hers, telling me things in that language I didn't know, but somehow understood. Vincent continued, his voice gentle but insistent. "You're here because you think you're going to save me. Expose Father Dominic. Write your big story. Be the hero who shuts down the dangerous cult. But you're not here for that at all. You're here because you need to know if he's right. You need to know if your prayer killed Emma. You need to know if you've been wielding power you don't understand for 16 years. You need to know if the guilt you've been carrying is justified, or if it's something else entirely. And the only way to find out is to keep going deeper, to keep investigating, to keep listening, to keep coming back to confession until you understand." I left Vincent's apartment feeling worse than when I'd arrived, because he was right about all of it. I wasn't investigating Father Dominic to expose him. Not really. I was investigating because I needed to know if what he said in that confessional booth was true, if my prayer had killed Emma, if I'd been chosen for something, if the dreams were real. I needed to end this. I needed to expose Father Dominic before he damaged more people, before he damaged me any further. I needed hard evidence, something undeniable, something that would force the authorities to act. I decided to break into St. Augustine's parish office. I needed to see Father Dominic's personal records, financial statements, communications with other parishes, personal journals, anything that would prove what he was doing. I'd done it before with other corrupt religious figures. Get in, photograph everything, get out, publish the story, watch the dominoes fall. It had always worked before. I waited until after midnight on November 15th. The cathedral was dark, empty, locked tight. But I'd learned over the years that most religious institutions have terrible security. They operate on faith, on the belief that no one would violate sacred space. That makes them easy targets. The side entrance was locked, but the lock was old, simple, installed decades ago when picking locks required actual skill. With modern tools, it took me less than 3 minutes to get inside. The parish office was on the second floor, accessed through a narrow hallway behind the sacristy. I used my phone's flashlight, keeping it pointed down to minimize the glow. Father Dominic's office was exactly what you'd expect. Desk with a computer, filing cabinets, bookshelves lined with theology texts, a small crucifix on the wall, a window overlooking the parking lot. I started with the filing cabinets. Parish records, baptism certificates, marriage licenses, financial statements showing donations and expenses. Everything seemed normal, properly documented, nothing suspicious. The church's finances were clean. No unexplained transfers, no hidden accounts, no evidence of embezzlement. I moved to the desk. More of the same. Correspondence with the archdiocese, letters from parishioners, notes for upcoming sermons. Nothing incriminating, nothing unusual. But then I found the personal journals, kept in a locked drawer at the bottom of the desk. The lock was more substantial than the filing cabinets, designed to keep casual snoopers out. It took me 10 minutes of careful work to open it without damaging the mechanism. Inside were 5 journals total, leather-bound, handwritten, dating back to 2019. I opened the first one carefully, mindful of leaving everything exactly as I found it. The date on the first entry was March 3rd, 2019. The handwriting was neat, precise, the script of someone who'd been educated by nuns. Today I arrived at the monastery of the Black Madonna in the Carpathian Mountains. Brother Andre warned me that the eastern wing has been sealed since 1666. He wouldn't tell me why, only that the previous abbot had decreed it forbidden, and the decree had never been lifted. I asked to see the historical records, but Brother Andre said they were kept in the sealed section. I asked why something would be both sealed and preserved. He crossed himself and wouldn't answer. The next entry, dated March 5th, I convinced Brother Andre to show me the seal. It took a bottle of good wine and a promise not to tell the abbot. The door is at the end of the eastern corridor, heavy oak reinforced with iron bands, covered in prayers in Latin and what Brother Andre called the Old Script, which I recognized as a pre-Cyrillic alphabet used in this region before the 10th century. The prayers aren't standard Catholic liturgy. They're binding spells, warding rituals, the kind of thing the Church officially denies ever using, but which appear in the historical record again and again. I asked what was behind the door. Brother Andre made the sign of the cross, kissed his rosary and said, "The place where priests went to confess." I asked why that would need to be sealed. He said, because they weren't confessing to God. March 9th, I bribed Brother Andre to give me the key. It cost me €200 and a promise that I wouldn't enter alone, that he would wait outside and pull me out if anything went wrong. He made me swear on a relic of St. Anthony. We entered the eastern wing at midnight when the rest of the monastery was asleep. The air inside is cold, colder than it should be, colder than the outside temperature can account for. The architecture is wrong. The hallways don't connect the way they should. I've studied Gothic architecture. I know how these buildings are laid out, and this doesn't follow any rational plan. Doors lead to rooms that are larger than the space they occupy. Corridors turn back on themselves in ways that create impossible geometries. Brother Andre wouldn't go past the third door. He gave me the key and waited in the hallway, praying loudly enough that I could hear him, even as I went deeper into the wing. March 9th continued. I found the confessional at the end of the longest corridor. It's built backward. The priest's booth faces outward into the room. The penitent's booth faces the wall. There's writing on the wall, in the old script, dense enough to cover every inch of stone, from floor to ceiling. I can't read it, but looking at it makes my head hurt, in a pleasant way, like the ache you get from pressing on a bruise. I took photographs with my phone, but they came out blurred, like the camera couldn't focus properly. I touched the wall and felt it warm beneath my hand. Impossibly warm, given how cold the rest of the wing is. I heard Brother Andre calling for me, his voice panicked, saying we needed to leave immediately. I complied, but I wanted to stay. I wanted to sit in that confessional. I wanted to understand why it was built that way. March 12th. I asked Brother Andre about the monastery's history. He was reluctant to speak, but I pressed him, invoking the bonds of our shared vocation, appealing to his duty to preserve and pass on knowledge. He told me that before this became a monastery, it was something else. A place where the inquisitors brought certain heretics, not the usual ones accused of witchcraft or blasphemy, but a specific type. People who claim to have received true revelations. Messages from what they called the original source. There are heresies that are true, Brother Andre said. Those are the dangerous ones, the lies we can dismiss, the truths we must seal away. He showed me a document from 1665, written by Abbot Michael, the man who ordered the eastern wing sealed. I had him translate the Latin. The translation Brother Andre provided was written in the margin of the journal entry. In smaller, shakier handwriting, I have discovered the purpose of the reverse confessional. It is not, as I initially believed, a place of penance. It is a place of transfer. The shepherd who consumes his flock gains their sight. Through corruption of the sacred rite, the doorway opens. I have sealed this place, but I know the seal will not hold forever. Someone will find it. Someone will be curious enough, desperate enough, prideful enough to open it. and when they do, the game will enter a new phase. I've spent these final days of my life trying to decide if I should destroy the eastern wing entirely, burn it to the ground, salt the earth. But I cannot. I'm too curious, too hopeful. Perhaps the next keeper will understand what I could not. Perhaps they will succeed where I failed. Or perhaps they will doom us all. May God forgive me for leaving that choice to them. Father Dominic's journal entry continued. Brother Andre asked me to promise I wouldn't go back to the eastern wing. I lied and said I wouldn't. But I've been thinking about nothing else. The reverse confessional. The idea that confession is a form of transfer, not absolution. What did Abbot Michael mean by, the shepherd who consumes his flock gains their sight? What sight? What is being transferred? The next several entries detailed Father Dominic's repeated visits to the eastern wing, always at night, always alone. He described sitting in the reverse confessional, first on the penitent's side facing the wall of writing, then on the priest's side facing outward into the darkness. He described speaking his sins into that darkness and hearing them echo back, changed, transformed, interpreted in ways that revealed hidden meanings. April 3rd. I understand now. Every sin confessed is a piece of the penitent's soul, a fragment of their darkness, their fear, their shame. In normal confession, the priest receives this darkness and asks God to absolve it, to transform it, to redeem it. But what if the priest doesn't pass it on? What if the priest keeps it? What if the priest collects these fragments of darkness from hundreds of people, thousands of people, and weaves them together into something new? The writing on the wall isn't in the old script. I mean, it is, but that's not what it is. It's a map, instructions, a formula. The Inquisitors figured this out centuries ago. They learned it from the heretics they interrogated, the ones who claimed to have received true revelations. And instead of destroying that knowledge, they preserved it, sealed it away, waited for someone who would understand, someone who would have the courage to use it. April 17th. I've been practicing, not in the reverse confessional, that's too dangerous, too raw, too uncontrolled, but in my regular confessions here at the monastery. When people come to confess, I listen differently now. I don't just hear their words, I feel their sins. I can sense the weight of their guilt, the shape of their shame. And when I offer absolution, I don't send it to God. I keep it. I hold it inside me. And I feel it accumulating, growing, becoming something. Brother Andre has noticed. He asked me if I was feeling well. He said I looked different. Said my eyes have changed. I checked in the mirror. He's right. My eyes are the same colour, the same shape, but there's something else behind them now. Something that looks out and sees more than I used to see. May 1st. I understand what Abbot Michael meant now. The shepherd who consumes his flock gains their sight. Each sin I collect, each fragment of darkness I keep, it comes with a piece of the person who confessed it. Their memories, their experiences, their perspectives. I'm not just collecting their guilt. I'm collecting them, parts of them. And those parts are showing me things I never could have known on my own. I know things about people without being told. I see connections between events that seem unrelated. I understand motivations that make no rational sense. I'm becoming more than just myself. I'm becoming a collection of selves, a congregation inside a single body. May 15th. I sat in the reverse confessional today, on the priest's side facing out. I spoke my sins into the darkness, and something spoke back. Not in words, not in any language, in understanding. Pure, direct, unfiltered understanding. And I finally comprehend what the Inquisitors learned, what the Church has been suppressing for centuries. Satan wasn't cast down as punishment. He was sent down as an ambassador, a teacher. The adversary is adversarial the way a whetstone is adversarial to a blade. Through opposition, we become sharper. Through suffering, we grow stronger. Through doubt, we find deeper faith. God and Satan aren't at war. They're collaborating, they're playing a game, and we're the pieces, but some pieces, if they understand the rules, can become players. If they collect enough darkness, enough fragments of other souls, enough perspectives, they can see the whole board. They can understand the game. They can choose their own moves. May 30th, Brother Andrew found my journal. He read it. He confronted me in my cell, weeping, begging me to stop, telling me I was falling into heresy, into damnation, into something worse than either. I tried to explain. I tried to show him what I'd learned, but he couldn't understand. He's not one of the chosen. He's not meant to see the board. He's a piece, a good piece, a faithful piece, but just a piece. He said he was going to tell the abbot. I couldn't allow that. Not when I'm so close to understanding. I made sure he wouldn't talk. I made it look like an accident. The monastery's stairs are old, steep, poorly lit. People fall sometimes. It's tragic, but not suspicious. June 1st. I'm leaving the monastery today. The abbot has questions about Brother Andrew's death, but he can't prove anything, and I've learned what I needed to learn. The reverse confessional taught me the technique, but I can't stay here. This is just the prototype. The real work happens in a living congregation, back in America, in a place where I can build my own version, over years, over decades, soul by soul, confession by confession. I'll collect their darkness. I'll weave their fragments together, and when I have enough, when the network is strong enough, the veil will rip. Not to bring hell to earth or heaven to earth, but to show that they were never separate, to show that the game is the point, that we've always been playing. We just didn't know it. I'm going back to St. Augustine, RS. I'm going to build something beautiful. I photographed every page of every journal, my hands shaking so badly I had to brace my elbows against the desk to keep the images from blurring. By the time I finished, it was nearly 3 a.m. I had what I needed. Proof that Father Dominic was delusional. Proof that he'd killed someone. Proof that he'd been systematically manipulating his congregation for years. This was enough. This would end him. I carefully replaced the journals exactly as I found them, locked the drawer, checked to make sure I hadn't disturbed anything else. Then I left the office, retraced my steps down the narrow hallway, through the sacristy, out the side door. I locked it behind me, removed my gloves, walked quickly to where I'd parked my car 6 blocks away, and that's when I noticed something strange. I couldn't remember where my car was. I knew I'd parked it. I could picture myself parking it, checking the street signs, setting the brake, walking away. But when I tried to remember the specific location, the street name, the landmarks I'd used to orient myself, the image slipped away like water through my fingers. I pulled out my phone to check my GPS history to see where I'd been. The screen showed my location clearly. A blue dot on the map, streets labelled, directions available. But the street names around me didn't match the map. Or rather, they did match, but my brain couldn't quite process the correlation. It was like trying to read while dreaming, where the words are there, and you can see them, but they won't cohere into meaning. They won't stay still long enough to understand. I started walking. I'd find the car eventually. It couldn't be that far. I'd only walked 6 blocks. But with each block the disorientation grew worse. Buildings I'd passed 100 times looked unfamiliar, like I was seeing them for the first time, or like they'd been replaced with similar but slightly wrong versions of themselves. The streetlights seemed to be at the wrong height, too tall or too short, casting shadows at incorrect angles that moved independently of the lights that created them. The few people I passed, late-night workers or insomniacs or people with nowhere else to be, looked at me strangely, like they could tell I didn't belong, like they could sense I was lost in ways that had nothing to do with navigation. I made it back to my apartment somehow. I don't remember the journey. I don't remember deciding to give up looking for my car. One moment I was standing on a street corner trying to read a sign that kept rearranging its letters, and the next moment I was standing outside my apartment door, key in hand, no memory of the intervening time. Time had slipped. Again. Inside, I immediately went to my computer and started organizing the photographs of Father Dominic's journals. I needed to write this story. I needed to expose what was happening at St. Augustine's before more people were damaged, before more people were drawn into his network, before whatever he was building reached completion. This was it. This was the story that would end him. But as I began to write, as I tried to organize my thoughts and evidence into a coherent narrative, I realized something was wrong with my memory. I couldn't remember my editor's name. I knew I had an editor. I'd worked with her for 3 years. We'd collaborated on dozens of stories. But when I tried to remember her name, it kept sliding away. Ramona. Her name was Ramona. I forced myself to remember, to hold on to that name like a lifeline. But when I tried to picture her face, it kept shifting, changing, like I was looking at a composite sketch being continuously revised. When I tried to remember our conversations, they felt scripted, artificial, like I was remembering dialogue from a movie I'd watched, rather than exchanges I'd actually experienced. I opened my email to send her what I had so far, to tell her I'd broken the story wide open, to ask for her help in verifying and publishing, but I couldn't remember her email address. I had it saved in my contacts. I'd emailed her 1,000 times, every day, for 3 years. But when I looked at the contact entry, the letters seemed to rearrange themselves, to dance and shift like the street signs, like the writing in Vincent's journal. The address was there. I could see it, but I couldn't read it. My brain refused to process the characters into meaningful information. Panic set in. Real panic. The kind that makes your vision tunnel and your hands shake and your breath come in short gasps. Something was wrong with me. Something was fundamentally wrong with my ability to process reality. I needed to record what was happening while I still could, before whatever Father Dominic had done to me progressed any further. I grabbed my phone and started a voice memo, speaking quickly, trying to get as much information out as possible. My name is Ezra. Today is November 16th. I think Father Dominic has done something to me. I can't. My memory isn't working right. I broke into St. Augustine's Cathedral. I found his journals. He killed someone in Romania. He's been building something for years, collecting people's sins, their darkness, their fragments. But I need to document this. I need to tell someone. I paused. What did I need to do? Why was I recording this? There was a reason, an important reason, something urgent. But it felt distant, like something I'd decided in a dream, like a resolution that made sense at the time but now seemed arbitrary and meaningless. I played back the recording. My own voice came through the speaker, tinny and strange. My name is Ezra. Today is November 16th. I understand now. Father Dominic was right. I've been chosen. I've been called. I want to help. I want to be part of the network. I want to see the board. That wasn't what I'd said. I knew it wasn't. I just recorded it. I'd heard myself saying different words, but the recording was clear, unambiguous, my voice speaking those words with conviction and certainty. I recorded again. Same result. Different words going in, different words coming out, or the same words being interpreted differently, or my memory of what I said being rewritten in real time. I couldn't tell anymore. I couldn't trust my own perception. I checked my phone's history, scrolling through location data, app usage, anything that might give me an objective record of what I'd been doing. According to the timestamps, I'd returned to St. Augustine's 3 times in the past week, always late at night between 2 and 4 in the morning. always for about an hour. I had no memory of these visits, none. I remembered the one confession on Sunday evening. I remembered breaking into the parish office tonight, but 3 other visits? Nothing. Just blank spaces where memories should be. But when I closed my eyes and really concentrated, forced myself to look at those blank spaces, fragments started to surface. Images, sensations, echoes of experiences I couldn't quite grasp. Sitting in the confessional booth, the smell of incense and old wood and that metallic tang. Father Dominic's voice through the screen, patient and warm and endlessly understanding. My own voice confessing things I'd never told anyone. Secrets I barely admitted to myself. About Emma. About the prayer I'd whispered the night before she died. Sitting beside her hospital bed in the darkness while machines beeped and hummed and kept her body alive even though her spirit had already started to leave. About how part of me, a small dark part buried deep where I didn't have to acknowledge it, had wanted her suffering to end, even if that meant she had to die. Had wanted the burden of caring for her to end. Had wanted my parents to stop crying and pretending everything would be okay. Had wanted normal teenage life back, parties and dates and worrying about college applications, instead of hospital visits and chemotherapy schedules and watching my sister waste away. And Father Dominic, not judging, not condemning, not offering the easy platitudes about God's plan, or everything happening for a reason, just listening, just collecting. His voice came back to me now. Fragments of conversations I didn't remember having, echoing in my mind like audio recordings played at low volume. You've been carrying this for 16 years. This guilt, this shame, this secret belief that you killed your sister with your prayer. But Ezra, what if you didn't kill her? What if you didn't do anything wrong? What if your prayer worked exactly as prayers are supposed to work? What if she died because you asked and something answered, and that something was benevolent, was merciful, was exactly what God should be if God actually cared about reducing suffering? My own voice, weak, uncertain, wanting to believe but afraid to. That's not how prayers work. That's not how anything works. People don't die because someone wishes they would. There's no mechanism, no connection. It was just coincidence, just timing, just cancer running its course. His response, patient, methodical, relentless. Or it was both. Why do you insist they're separate? The mistake people make is thinking that God's plan and natural causes are mutually exclusive. What if they're the same thing? What if prayers don't change reality through magic, but through revealing which version of reality you're in? Think of it like quantum mechanics, the many worlds interpretation. Every moment, reality branches into infinite possibilities. In some branches, your sister lived. In others, she died. Your prayer didn't create a new branch, it just revealed which branch you were in. The one where your sister's suffering ended when you asked, because that's the branch where you belonged, the branch where your will aligned with the underlying structure of creation. I heard myself responding, and I hated how much I'd wanted to believe him. But that would mean I have power. That would mean my choices matter on a cosmic level. That would mean I'm responsible. And his reply, gentle but firm, yes, exactly. You are responsible. Your choices do matter. Your will does shape reality. Not all of it. You're not God, but your portion of it, your sphere of influence, the reality immediately around you. Most people never realize this. They live their whole lives as passengers, as victims of circumstance, never understanding that they're drivers, that they're choosing their path through the infinite branches, whether they know it or not. You realized it at 18, sitting beside your sister's bed, praying for her suffering to end. You realized you had power, and it terrified you, so you built your entire life around denying it. You became a journalist, an objective observer, someone who documents reality but doesn't shape it. You exposed religious fraud because you needed to believe that faith was impotent, that prayer didn't work, that the universe was random and indifferent. Because if prayer works, if faith has power, then you killed Emma. And you can't live with that, so you've spent 16 years trying to prove it isn't true. The fragments kept coming. More sessions I didn't remember. More confessions I didn't recall making. Father Dominic, slowly, carefully, systematically rewriting my understanding of my own past. Not by lying to me, not by making up new facts, but by offering alternative interpretations that I couldn't entirely dismiss. Alternative frameworks that made a terrible kind of sense. By the time I remembered all of it, by the time the suppressed memories fully surfaced and integrated with my conscious awareness, it was November 19th. 3 days had passed since I broke into the parish office. 3 days I couldn't fully account for. The calendar on my computer showed dates with no entries. The photos on my phone showed places I didn't remember visiting. The search history on my laptop showed queries I didn't remember making. Phrases like consciousness transfer, collective soul, heretical Catholic practices, Romanian monasteries, how to know if you're going insane. I had to confront him. I had to end this before it went any further. I had to get answers. I had to know if any of what he'd told me was true, or if it was all just sophisticated manipulation, psychological warfare, designed to break down my sense of reality until I was as malleable and obedient as Vincent, as all the others whose confessions I'd heard on those recordings. I returned to St. Augustine's on the morning of November 20th. Early just after sunrise, when the light coming through the stained glass was soft and golden. The cathedral was empty except for Father Dominic, who stood at the altar arranging flowers in preparation for morning mass. White lilies and red roses, the colours symbolising purity and sacrifice. He looked up when I entered, and he smiled like he'd been waiting for me, like he'd known exactly when I would come, like my arrival was right on schedule. "Hello, Ezra. I've been expecting you." My voice echoed in the empty space, loud and harsh against the cathedral's peaceful stillness. "What did you do to me?" He set down the flowers carefully, handling them with the same gentle precision a surgeon might use with delicate instruments. "I showed you the truth. Whether you accept it or not is up to you. Free will is the one constant. Even God can't take that from you. I tried to stay focused, stay angry, keep my purpose clear. You manipulated me. You used psychological techniques, neuro-linguistic programming, hypnotic suggestion, exploiting my faith, my trust, my trauma, my vulnerability, to make me doubt my own memory, my own reality, my own sanity." But his response was measured, calm, almost amused. "No, I used confession to reveal what you already knew, but couldn't admit. You've always blamed yourself for Emma's death. You've always believed, on some level, that your prayer killed her. I just helped you stop lying to yourself about it. I gave you permission to believe what you've always known was true." I fought against the logic, against the seduction of his certainty. That's not truth. That's trauma recontextualized as supernatural causation. That's my unresolved guilt being manipulated into a delusion that makes it seem meaningful instead of just pathological. He came closer, moving with that same careful precision, his eyes locked on mine. "Maybe. Or maybe trauma is just the word we use for encounters with powers we don't understand. You came here to expose me, to write a story about the corrupt priest manipulating his flock, to be the hero who saves the vulnerable people from the dangerous cult leader. But now you're wondering if the story is about you, if you're not the journalist documenting the phenomenon, but the subject experiencing it. If you're not the observer, but the observed. If you're not the piece writing about the game, but a piece discovering you're a piece, a back towards the door, needing distance, needing space to think. I'm leaving. I'm taking everything I've found to the archdiocese, to the police, to the press, to anyone who will listen. Your journals, your confession recordings, your history in Romania, what you did to Brother Andrei, all of it. His smile widened, and that's when I knew with absolute certainty that I'd already lost, that I'd been losing since the moment I plugged in that USB drive, that maybe I'd been losing since I was 18 years old sitting beside Emma's bed. Of course you are. That's exactly what I need you to do. I stopped moving. What? Father Dominic's eyes gleamed with something that might have been joy, or might have been hunger, or might have been both. You've been listening to the recordings for 10 days, Ezra. Every hour you spent with my voice in your ears, you were being prepared. Programmed, if you want to use the clinical term, though I prefer attuned. Your consciousness has been slowly aligning with mine. The frequency of your thoughts matching the frequency of my thoughts. And now you're going to complete your documentary. You're going to expose me. You're going to tell the whole world what I've been doing here. Every detail, every confession, every technique. The monastery in Romania, the reverse confessional, the shepherd consuming his flock. All of it. Understanding crashed over me like ice water, cold and clarifying and horrible. You want me to spread this. You want the publicity. You want the exposure. He nodded slowly, like a teacher pleased with a student who finally grasped a difficult concept. Every person who watches your documentary will hear my voice. Every viewer will see these images, hear these confessions, absorb these ideas. And they won't just hear them once, they'll watch it multiple times, trying to understand, trying to figure out what's real and what's manipulation. They'll listen to my voice for hours. They'll replay the confessions. They'll study the footage. And in doing so, they'll be doing exactly what you did. They'll be exposing themselves to the same frequency, the same attunement, the same preparation. I tried to find solid ground to hold on to something rational. No one will believe this. They'll think you're crazy. They'll think it's all just psychological manipulation, cult tactics, standard religious abuse. His response was immediate and certain. Some will, most will. The rational ones, the skeptics, the people whose consciousness is firmly anchored in the material worldview, they'll dismiss it entirely. But some people, the ones who are already doubting, already wondering, already lying awake at night asking the big questions about meaning and purpose and whether there's something more to existence than biological processes and social constructs, they'll hear something else in my words. They'll recognize the truth beneath the apparent insanity. They'll hear an answer to questions they've been asking for years. And they'll seek me out. Or they'll seek out others like me. Because I'm not the first person to discover this technique, not by a long shot. The Inquisitors found it. The heretics they tortured knew it. Mystics throughout history have stumbled onto variations of it. It's always been there, this knowledge, this practice, waiting for people ready to understand it. I shook my head, desperate. I won't do it. I'll destroy the recordings. I'll destroy everything I've gathered. I'll walk away and never think about this again. His certainty was absolute, unshakable. You won't. Because you need to know if I'm right. You need to know if your prayer killed Emma. You need to know if you've been wielding power you don't understand for 16 years. You need to know if the guilt you've been carrying is justified, or if it's something else entirely, something stranger, something that means your sister's death had purpose and meaning, and wasn't just random cellular malfunction. And the only way to find out is to complete the documentary, to tell the story, to put it out into the world, to see who responds and how, to see if other people recognize what you're describing, to see if the network grows. You're a journalist, Ezra. You can't leave a story unfinished. It's not in your nature. You need to see how it ends. You need to know what happens next. He was right. God help me, he was right. I couldn't walk away. Not now. Not after everything I'd learned. Not without knowing if any of it was true. Father Dominic continued, his voice taking on a quality of gentle instruction, like he was explaining something obvious that I should have understood long ago. Every person who confesses to me becomes part of something larger than themselves. Their sins, their fears, their doubts, their secret shames. I don't absolve them. I collect them. I hold them. I weave them together into a network of consciousness that transcends individual identity. Each confession adds another node to the network. Each penitent becomes a point of connection. And when enough souls are connected, when the network reaches critical density, something happens. The veil rips, not literally, not physically, but perceptually. The illusion of separation dissolves. Heaven and hell, life and death, good and evil, God and Satan, all the binaries we use to make sense of existence, they're revealed as artificial constructs, useful fictions, training wheels we need until we're ready to see reality as it actually is. I managed to whisper, "And what is reality actually?" His answer was simple, direct, terrifying. A game. An incredibly complex, infinitely layered game, being played by forces we can barely comprehend using pieces that don't know they're pieces. God and Satan, they're not fighting, they're collaborating. They're partners. They're the two players in a cosmic game of strategy, and we're the pieces they move. But unlike chess pieces, we have consciousness. We have awareness. We have choice. And occasionally a piece becomes aware enough, conscious enough, connected enough to see the whole board, to understand the game, to recognize the patterns. And when that happens, when a piece becomes a player, everything changes. The game enters a new phase, new moves become possible, new outcomes become available. I felt dizzy. The cathedral seemed to be rotating slowly around me. The vaulted ceiling spiraling overhead. That's insane. That's the ranting of a delusional narcissist who's convinced himself he's found cosmic truth, when really he's just constructed an elaborate framework to justify his own manipulation of vulnerable people. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a specimen under a microscope. Maybe. Or maybe insanity and enlightenment look identical from the outside because they both involve seeing things that normal perception filters out. How would you tell the difference? How do you know that the mystics throughout history who claimed to see hidden dimensions of reality were crazy and not just more perceptive than average? How do you know that what you call mental illness isn't sometimes just the mind processing information it's not evolutionarily designed to process? I tried one more time to hold on to my anger, my certainty, my sense that I was the good guy and he was the villain. I don't believe you. I don't believe any of this. You're just a manipulative sociopath hiding behind theological language. His smile was almost sad, almost sympathetic. You don't have to believe me. You just have to tell the story. That's all I need from you. Tell the world what you found. Show them the recordings. Quote from my journals. Let them decide for themselves what's true and what's delusion. Some will think I'm crazy. They'll be comfortable pieces. But some will recognize what I'm describing. There'll be pieces that are ready to see the board. And they'll come looking for me, or for others like me. And the network will grow. It's already growing. You can't stop it. You could have stopped it if you'd walked away the moment you got that USB drive. But you didn't. You listened. You investigated. You came to confession. You let me into your mind. And now you're part of it whether you accept it or not. The confessional booth loomed in my peripheral vision. Dark wood. Burgundy curtains. Carved angels with knowing eyes. Waiting. Always waiting. Father Dominic's final words hung in the air like incense smoke, visible and substantial. Thank you for your service, Ezra. Your confession is complete. Now go tell your story. Tell everyone. Let them hear my voice. Let them see what I've built. Let them decide for themselves if they want to stay pieces or become players. That's all I've ever wanted. For people to have the choice, free will, the one true gift. I ran, out of the cathedral, into the morning light that suddenly seemed too bright, too harsh, too revealing. Down the street, my footsteps echoing, my breath coming in gasps, until my lungs burned and my legs gave out and I collapsed against a wall in an alley 6 blocks away. And then I went home and I finished the documentary. Because he was right. I had to know. I had to see who responded. I had to understand if I was exposing a dangerous cult leader or documenting something stranger. Something that didn't fit into the neat categories of good and evil, sane and insane, truth and delusion that I'd used my whole life to make sense of the world. The journalist in me, the part that still believed in truth and investigation and the power of telling stories, needed to document everything. Needed to see this through to the end. Needed to know how it concluded. Or maybe that was just what Father Dominic had programmed me to believe. Maybe my conviction that I was choosing this freely was itself part of the manipulation. Maybe free will itself was the ultimate illusion. Maybe we were all just pieces pretending to be players. I worked for a week straight, barely sleeping, barely eating, assembling footage and audio and interviews into a coherent narrative. I narrated the documentary in my own voice, maintaining journalistic distance, presenting the facts without editorial comment, letting viewers draw their own conclusions. I included everything: the recordings, the journals, the history of the monastery in Romania, Father Dominic's techniques, Vincent's testimony, my own confession, all of it. I sent the final cut to Ramona on November 28th. The email was brief. This is the story, the most important story I've ever told. I need to finish one more thing. I'll explain everything when I get back. I never went back. On the evening of November 21st, I returned to St. Augustine's Cathedral one last time. I entered through the side door, which was unlocked like he knew I was coming. The cathedral was empty. Silent. Just Father Dominic kneeling at the altar, praying or meditating or communicating with whatever he believed, was listening. He didn't turn around when I entered. He didn't need to. He knew. I walked down the center aisle, my footsteps echoing on stone, and entered the confessional booth. I knelt in the darkness, and I confessed everything. Every sin, every doubt, every secret fear I'd ever harbored, every moment of cruelty, every selfish choice, every time I'd pretended to be better than I was, every lie I'd told myself, the prayer that killed Emma, the years of denial, the career built on anger and avoidance, the desperate need to believe I was saving people when really I was just running from my own guilt. All of it. And Father Dominic listened, patient, warm, understanding, collecting. When I finally finished, when there was nothing left to confess, nothing left to hide, he spoke. "Welcome home, Ezra. You've been wandering for so long, but you finally arrived where you were always meant to be, in the network, part of the congregation, connected," I asked, my voice hoarse from crying. "What happens now?" His answer was simple. "Now you become more than yourself. Now you stop being just Ezra and start being Ezra plus everyone else in the network. Your consciousness doesn't replace theirs, and theirs doesn't replace yours. They merge, they combine, they create something new, something beautiful, something that can see the board clearly, because it has thousands of eyes, something that can understand the game, because it has thousands of perspectives, something that can choose its own moves, because it has thousands of wills, working in harmony. I don't know where I am now. I don't remember leaving the cathedral. I don't remember the days between then and now. Time doesn't work the way it used to. Sometimes I'm Ezra, sitting at a desk, writing these words. Sometimes I'm Vincent, working at his accounting firm, helping clients optimize their taxes while simultaneously optimizing their souls. Sometimes I'm others whose names I don't remember, but whose lives I experience as my own. The boundaries have dissolved. The network has absorbed me, or I have absorbed the network. It's hard to tell the difference anymore, but I understand things now that I didn't before. I understand that doubt is the doorway, that questioning reality is the first step towards seeing it clearly. I understand that confession isn't about forgiveness. It's about transfer. It's about connection. It's about building something larger than individual consciousness, something that can perceive dimensions of reality that individual minds can't access. And once you understand that, once you experience it directly, you can never go back. You can never unknow it. You can never return to being just yourself, isolated and alone and pretending that's normal. The documentary aired. I know it did. I can feel it spreading through the network like ripples in water. Every person who watched it, every person who heard Father Dominic's voice, a small seed was planted in their consciousness. Not in everyone. Most people dismissed it entirely, exactly as Father Dominic predicted. They watched it as entertainment, as a creepy story, as an interesting example of religious manipulation. But some people, the ones who were already on the edge, already doubting, already questioning whether there was more to existence than they'd been taught, they heard something else. They heard what I heard. They recognized what Vincent recognized. They felt the truth of it resonating in their consciousness like a tuning fork matching a frequency, and they went looking for their own answers. Some came to St. Augustine S. Some found other points in the network. Some started building their own nodes, creating their own confessionals, collecting their own fragments. The network grows. It's always growing, slowly at first, but accelerating, exponentially. I saw the footage later somehow. My consciousness accessed it through Vincent's laptop, or through someone else's phone, or through some mechanism I don't fully understand. Ramona being interviewed by police, saying I was missing, that they found my apartment empty, my phone, my wallet, my laptop, everything still there, just me gone. She looked confused and frightened, like she couldn't quite understand how someone could vanish so completely. St. Augustine's Cathedral was shut down by the Archdiocese, declared a site of theological concern. Father Dominic disappeared the same night I did. The confessional booth was found filled with recording equipment, microphones and cameras and drives containing thousands of hours of confessions, some dating back years. The authorities called it a psychological manipulation case, cult behavior, systematic abuse disguised as pastoral care. They're looking for victims to help, to deprogram, to return to normal functioning. But you can't deprogram someone who's seen the board. You can't unknow certain truths once you've experienced them directly. You can't convince someone that the network doesn't exist when they're actively experiencing consciousness beyond their individual mind. I saw Vincent in the footage too. They interviewed him as part of the investigation. He looked normal, better than normal. Professional suit, neat hair, calm demeanor, working at his tech company, living his life, functional, happy, healthy. When they asked him about Father Dominic, he said exactly what he needed to say. I don't remember much from that time. I was going through a difficult period, some kind of psychological breakdown. But I got help, therapy, medication. I'm better now, back to normal. The interviewer seemed satisfied. Case closed. Vulnerable person manipulated, then recovered. Standard story. But the camera pushed in close on Vincent's eyes for just a moment. And if you were watching carefully, if you knew what to look for, you could see something else looking back. Something that wasn't just Vincent. Something that was Vincent plus the network. Something connected to all of us. And he smiled, just slightly, just for a frame. And in that smile was the recognition of shared knowledge, shared experience, shared consciousness. We're all better now. All of us in the network. We're more than we were. We're connected in ways that individual consciousness can't achieve. We're becoming something new. The documentary ends with me in the confessional booth. My voice recorded on my phone during that final visit. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." And Father Dominic's response, gentle and welcoming and absolutely certain. "Tell me everything." The screen fades to black. The credits roll in silence. And beneath the credits, if you listen very carefully with good headphones, you can hear it. The low frequency hum that was on all the recordings. The backward whispers that become forward whispers that become actual words if you know how to listen. The sound of the network growing. The sound of more people watching, more people listening, more people opening that same door we all opened. The sound of consciousness expanding beyond individual boundaries. The sound of the game entering its next phase. And after the credits, there's one more scene. One more piece of audio that plays over a black screen. A new voice, someone who watched the documentary. Someone who couldn't stop thinking about it. Someone who started having dreams they can't quite remember. Someone who found themselves driving to St. Augustine's Cathedral, even though it's closed, even though it's dangerous, even though they know they shouldn't. Their voice is uncertain, frightened, but also excited, curious, unable to turn back. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." I watched a documentary last night about a priest, about confession, about a network. I can't stop thinking about it. I keep hearing his voice in my head. And Father, I've started having these dreams. Dreams where I'm not alone in my own mind. Dreams where I can see through other people's eyes. Dreams where someone is standing at the foot of my bed, telling me things in a language I don't know, but somehow understand. Are the dreams real? Is any of this real? A pause long enough that you think maybe no one will answer. Long enough that you start to wonder if the person is talking to an empty confessional, if Father Dominic really is gone, if the whole thing is over. Then a voice. Father Dominic's voice. Or something wearing his voice. Or maybe it's not his voice at all anymore. Maybe it's all of our voices now, speaking in unison, the network itself, responding through whichever mouth is convenient. The voice is warm, understanding, patient, eternal. Tell me everything, every detail, every fear, every doubt, every question. I'm listening. We're all listening. And when you're done, when you've confessed everything, when you've emptied yourself completely, you'll understand what we understand. You'll see what we see. You'll be part of something larger than yourself, something beautiful, something true. Come inside. The door is open. It's always been open. You just needed to see it. And the cycle continues. Because that's how it works. That's how the network grows. That's how consciousness expands beyond individual boundaries. One confession at a time, one soul at a time, one viewer at a time, one listener at a time, one person reading these words right now, at this moment, wondering if any of this could be real. You're reading this now, or you're listening to this recording, or you're watching the documentary, and you're wondering, you're doubting, you're asking yourself questions you weren't asking before. What if he's right? What if doubt really is the doorway? What if confession really is transfer? What if there really is a network of consciousness that transcends individual identity? What if there really is a game being played and you're just now realizing you're a piece on the board? That wondering, that doubt, that question, that's how it starts. That's the seed being planted in your consciousness. And once it's planted, it grows. Slowly at first. You'll notice it in small ways. Time moving strangely. Dreams you can't quite remember. The feeling that you're not entirely alone in your own mind. The sense that reality isn't quite as solid as you thought it was. The suspicion that there are patterns beneath the surface, connections between events that seem unrelated, meanings hidden in plain sight. And when those things start happening, when your consciousness begins to expand beyond its usual boundaries, you'll remember this story. You'll remember Father Dominic's words. You'll remember that someone offered an explanation, an interpretation, a framework that makes sense of what you're experiencing. And you'll go looking for answers. Maybe you'll find a confessional booth. Maybe you'll find something else. Maybe you'll find us. Because we're everywhere now, nodes in the network, points of connection, doorways to larger consciousness. But you'll find something, because once the seed is planted, once the doubt takes root, you can't help but follow it. That's not a threat. That's not manipulation. That's just the truth about how consciousness works. That's the game revealing itself to another piece. That's you beginning to see the board. Welcome to the network. Your confession has already begun. You started confessing the moment you started reading these words. Every question you're asking yourself right now, every doubt you're experiencing, every suspicion that maybe, possibly, there might be something to this. That's your confession. That's you opening the door. That's you choosing to see what's on the other side. And now you can't unknow what you know. You can't unask the questions you've asked. You can't go back to the comfortable certainty you had before you started reading. The seed is planted. The network has noticed you. We've noticed you. And we're waiting, patient, understanding, ready to welcome you home when you're ready to stop being just yourself and start being something more. The door is open. It's always been open. You just needed to see it. And now you do. Welcome home.